So now let's go ahead and work on the serve server. So we're gonna make sure we can capture a new server when the user fills out this form. And then whenever they click save, we're gonna send that to the backend and we're gonna show that new server in this list right here. So let's go ahead and work on that. So I'm gonna go back to the code and I'm just gonna copy this ping and I'm gonna scroll down and then paste it. And I'm gonna call it save server. So we're gonna say save server. And this is gonna take the ng form. So let's call this server form and it's gonna be of type ng form. So this is ng form coming from Angular. As you can see, it's coming from Angular forms, and that's what we're gonna take in here. We don't need to do anything with this filter. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete this line and we're gonna call the service. This time we're not gonna call the ping, we're gonna call the save. So we call the save. And then we're gonna give it the form value. So the form value, it's gonna represent a JSON object of the data that we pass into the form. So we're gonna say server form that value, and that's what we're gonna pass here. If I hover over this, you're gonna see that it's gonna give me the type any, but that's not a problem because it's gonna be converted into an object with the keys and values that we need for the backend, so the backend will be able to interpret it. But if you want, you can cast this here. For example, you can put the diamond again, and then you can say this is gonna be a server. You can do it that way, so that should work as well. Or another thing you can do, you can pass it in as a server. So you can put it like this, and then you say as server. So either way it will work. It's not gonna be a problem. And we're getting this error because it looks like it's importing server from the wrong place. So let's look at our import. This is not where we want to import that. I'm gonna delete it and see if I can re-import it. Quick fix, and it's supposed to come from our interface just like that. So you can do it that way, or you can do it in front with the diamond, but it doesn't really matter because this is not going to cause a problem even if we didn't cast it. I just wanted to show you that you can actually cast it if you want to. So when we call the save, what the save is going to return us from the back end, it's going to return us the object or the server that we just saved, right? So we're going to do the same thing again, meaning when we start, we're going to start with data loaded, and then we're going to keep the existing data on the UI so that we don't have any glitch in the UI. Like you're going to see the UI disappear and it reappears again when the call comes back, or if the call takes a long time, then it's just going to disappear and then come back. We don't want that to happen. So we always want to have our data to be shown to the user because the data already loaded initially when we call engine init, like I already explained. Now the next thing we want to do is we're not going to do all this. So I'm going to just delete some of this stuff. What we want to do when we get the data, so let's just delete all these lines just so you guys can see this clearly. So when we get the data back, right, we're gonna still return this data, but we're gonna modify it. And what we're going to do is the new server that we're gonna get back, we're gonna add it to the list of servers inside of this object, which is containing all of our information or all of our data. And we can do this pretty simply. So we can go down here and we can call this data, and I call the data subject. So this is all the data that we have in the application. And what I want to do is to just push on a new object on it, or I'm just going to change the information inside of this data object. And then what I'm going to do is to just pass in everything that I already have. So let's go on a new line, and I'm going to pass an object, and I'm going to copy everything that I have in the response. So I'm going to do the spread operator again, copy the response. And the only thing that I want to change is the data. And remember, the data is an object, so open and close curly braces. You can see that the error is gone because we can actually pass in an empty object. And what we need to do here is to just put the new server on top of the list or on top of the array, and then add the existing ones after the first one. So we can do that pretty easily. We can just say we're going to override the servers. Remember, this object has a property called servers. So we're going to say for the servers, which is an array, we're going to define the bracket so that we can see this is going to be an array. What we're going to do is to pass in the server that we get back. So the server that just got saved in the backend, which gets returned to us from the API. We're going to put that server at the beginning of our array. So we're going to say response.data, and we need to access the server. So that's going to override the data, particularly the server's property inside of that object, and then replace it. And then we need to pass in the existing servers. So for that, we know where to go get it. So we're going to say this, that data subject, that data, that's, oops, we have to do that data. We have to access the value first, and then data, and then we need the servers. So we're going to say servers. And of course, we're spreading this, so we need to pass in the spread operator here as well. And we don't need to do this response. Again, just to reiterate, we're gonna change this data. We're gonna push next onto it. So we're gonna push a new object onto it. And the object we're gonna push is everything that we got from the response so that we can capture all the metadata in the response. And the only thing we're overriding is this data. So what we're overriding is the servers because that's what we're displaying on the UI. We're going to say for the servers, take the first server that we got back from the response, put it at index 0 in the array, and then give us all the other ones that we already have in the existing data. So from the data subject, and then we're going to put them after the first one or after the one that just got saved so that it can be on top of the list. And after we do this, there's some cleanup things we have to do. So now we have our data, it's updated, and that's the data that we're passing it here. So we don't have to make any changes in the return, but we do have to close the modal, and we're just going to do that the typical JavaScript way. So I'm going to say document.get element by ID and then pass in the button ID. So here I think I named it close modal. So that's the ID of the button. And once we get that button, we can just call the click function on it because we know it's going to exist because we're accessing a button. So this is going to close the modal, and then the data is going to be updated after we return this, and the user will see the new server that they just added. It's going to be on top of the list. And then after we do all this, another thing we have to do is to reset the form. So I'm going to call the server form, and let's just call it reset form. And then here, what I want to do is to pass a new object because I want to reset the form, but I want to set the status to be a default, and that's going to be the server down. I don't think I need to put space here, but I'll put space here. So I'm going to update the status so you can see it's coming up here. For the status, I'm going to say this is going to be this, that status. So the status that we have in this class, and then call server down. So we're going to put a default in the form, which is going to be server down. And that's the only field that we're updating in the form. All the other fields are going to be empty because we're not setting anything for them. But for the status, we're going to say, okay, the status by default, whenever you open the form again, after we reset the form, we're only going to set the status to server down. And you can change this if you want. You can put anything you want, or you can just reset the form or just call the reset. It's going to empty everything.